Hello, friends, and welcome to Read Through the Word. Today is Saturday, November 30th, the last day in November. That seems kind of hard to believe. If you have celebrated Thanksgiving, I hope that you have had a restful couple of days, that you've been able to just have time to just reflect on God's goodness to us and the way we can reflect that goodness to others. So I hope you're doing really well here with me today, and let's dig into our lesson. So we're in 2 Corinthians, and today we're going to talk about 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. It seemed kind of appropriate in thinking about Thanksgiving, but something else kind of kept coming to me too about it, and I want to share that with you. So 2 Corinthians 9, starting at verse 6 says, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctant or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. As it is written, He has scattered abroad His gifts to the poor. His righteousness endures forever." And I thought a lot about that verse. It's very easy to talk about reaping and sowing from a financial standpoint or a material standpoint, and it's certainly a very important topic. I think it's discouraging sometimes that I feel like at any given moment we would be able to find a current situation of a church or a pastor or a church leader or a head of a Christian organization that has been found to be unfaithful with their finances, illegal with their finances even. They have mismanaged the money that has been given to them for the purpose of God's kingdom. And that is definitely something we have to continually, I think, be aware of and be vigilant about, because those who oversee the money that's given for kingdom purposes are called to a high standard. And truly, we do reap what we sow. And so eventually, if there is financial mismanagement, it comes out, right? It comes to the light, and lots of consequences spiral forth, not just for the pastor or for the church leaders, but for the church and for the kingdom as a whole. So there's certainly a lot we could say about that, and probably many of you have been at both the giving and receiving end of generosity, and it's a very beautiful thing to experience in both directions. But there's something that kept coming to me, and today especially, probably because I really struggled with it today. So God kind of put it on my heart as I was thinking about this lesson, and wouldn't you know it, today was a day where I really had to think through this and to practice what I was hearing from God. So, when we read about the early church and the book of Acts, Paul's letters to the different churches, it's very clear that the way they manage their money and take care of those who are in need, or the way that they bring, carefully bring money to other churches, or the way that they take, the way that these churches are called to give, there is a high standard Paul calls people to in how they manage their money. It's important. But the thing that kept coming to me about reaping and sowing was something that's actually far more valuable than money. And we use it more often than we use money. And it's our words. what we reap and sow from our words has eternal value. And we use our words every day, all day. And depending on, what you're, whether you're at work or at home or wherever you're at, it could be more or less depending on the situation, but we use our words all day. Every time we use our words, we're sowing and reaping. And its value, the value of our words is beyond measure. And today I was thinking about that as the day went on. I had several things I had to do. I think many of you know I live in Wisconsin, and the frigid cold has begun to set in. I have a real hard time being thankful when I'm frigidly cold. And I've lived in Wisconsin, most of my life, so I feel like I shouldn't have an excuse, but I was tired. I was stressed about some things. I was stressed that I had to go out in the cold today. Multiple things had not been going right. And I had my 3 daughters in the car with me. We were driving around, and then we had to do some things, and I had some responsibilities at church. And I cannot tell you how many times I heard God just kind of gently nudging me, or kind of felt God gently nudging me, like, I understand you're stressed right now, but what are you telling yourself about this situation, and what's coming out of your mouth at your kids because of how you feel? And I thought, all right, I could easily I could sow and reap something very different. I could easily sow, be like, look, I'm stressed. I have a right to vent, or they'll understand, or I could work myself up to a higher stress depending on what I'm telling myself about the situation. And we could have come home in a place where my kids maybe would have felt very discouraged and defeated, or just kind of like, all right, we just don't want to be my mom right now. Or maybe even just kind of feeling that low feeling of being around somebody who's just letting words fly that are careless. I'm like, okay, I could go that direction. And by the time we get home from these things, from all these things we have to do, I can reap that, or I can take a deep breath and I can just directly call on Jesus for immediate aid in closing my mouth, in rewiring, my thoughts and my words, so that when we come home, my kids might be like, well, we can see mom's under stress, but there's not a feeling of discouragement in them. There's not a feeling of, there's not a feeling of stress in them, like I've taken it out on them, or I've said words that make them feel down. Because when we're stressed, I don't think God's asking us to pretend everything's perfect, right? So it's okay for people around us to see, yeah, she's stressed. That's okay. It happens. Stress is part of humanity. And I know we're supposed to trust God and give things over to them. And we do, but we are also human. And so it was a very different thing. And thankfully, I felt God absolutely nudging me multiple times today saying, is this really what you want to say? Is this really what you want to sow and reap in your kids right now? Do you want to come home today, and do you want to feel the tension of all of the unkind words that you've let out of your mouth? Or do you want to show them that even though you're stressed, you can still control what comes out of your mouth? And I'm really glad I chose that option. I'm telling you, I didn't do it well at first, and it wasn't easy, okay? But as God kept nudging me, I kept taking deep breaths and saying, all right, I want to reap something where I'm going to still feel connected to my children, and they're not going to feel the weight of unkind words that came as a result of my stress. Okay, that was kind of a long example, but I hope that it was helpful, because I'm sure many of you have gone through stressful situations where the words just, they're right there. They want to come out so bad. But every single day, we have this amazing choice to reap what we sow with our mouths. And I think we have a chance to do this in 3 specific ways. One is in the words that people say to us. Now, we can't control what people say to us, but we can control how we internalize what they say. And we can easily allow ourselves to become immediately angry, immediately reactive, defensive, bitter, right? We can choose to look at it through the lens of, if somebody says something unkind to us, or even abusive or wrong or mean, we can say, I know that that's not true. Another way is through what we say to other people, obviously. We will reap the words that we sow in the lives of other people. And sometimes that means keeping our mouths quiet and not saying what we want to say. And sometimes that means saying something, and when we don't feel like saying something, or when we forget, like we're just going about our day, and man, there's words of life that we could be sowing in the people around us. We could be sowing words of life, and we just get busy, or we don't think it's that big of a deal, and we just don't say anything. But just one thing could change somebody else's day. Just one word could change your child's day. Reacting in kindness instead of frustration to your kid repeatedly pushing your buttons can sow and reap something really good. And it's also in the way that we talk to ourselves. How do you talk to yourself? Did you know that science has shown that our thoughts are not just these invisible things or whatever. They literally create neural connections in your brain that affect your entire body, your spirit, your brain. Neural connections are made based on what you tell yourself. What do we tell ourselves? What are you telling yourself about who you are, about the person God made you to be, about your situation, about your life? Your body is listening to what you're telling yourself in your brain. Chronic stress, chronic immune things, chronic, being in trauma, all of these things have an effect on our body. And when we speak to our brain in a way that's constantly maybe discouraging or threatening even, our body then feels like there's a threat. That's amazing. The words we tell ourselves can literally tell our body you're safe or you're threatened. That's pretty powerful. It's not just the words we speak to others. It's not just the way we receive the words coming from others. It's the way we talk to ourselves too. Proverbs 18:21, one of my favorite verses. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. That's the NIV. The New Living Translation says, the tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Sowing and reaping with our words. Life or death, safety or threat, love or despair. All of these are choices we make every time we open our mouth and every time we talk to ourselves. I want you to know today that you are loved no matter what. That you matter, that you're not alone, even if you might feel it, you're not alone. And I want you to know that you have the power to change somebody else's life through what you say. And you have the power to change your own life in what you say to yourself. Let's agree with all the beautiful things that God has said about us and others, and sow and reap in righteousness those beautiful things today. We'll see you we'll see you next time, friends. Thanks for joining us on Read Through the Word.